The plane trembled like a giant bird caught in a storm. A deep roar echoed through the cabin, luggage rattled, cups flew, and passengers gasped in fear. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts." The captain's voice cracked through the intercom, trembling with tension. 14-year-old Emma Rayner pressed her back into the seat, gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her mother beside her tried to stay calm, but her trembling hands betrayed her fear. The flight from Denver to Miami had been perfectly calm, until now. Suddenly, the left wing tilted hard. The entire plane dipped, throwing a baby's toy across the aisle. The lights flickered. The sound of the engine, that constant hum, was gone. In its place came a terrifying silence, followed by the captain's shout from the cockpit. "Greater than, engines gone. We're losing thrust." The next few seconds were chaos. A scream, a prayer, a flight attendant rushing forward, and then, an oxygen mask dropped right in front of Emma's face. The cabin filled with gasps and sobs. The world seemed to shrink into that narrow metal tube, suspended thousands of feet in the air. Emma's heart raced, pounding like a drum in her chest. Her mother fumbled with the mask, placing it over Emma's small face before putting on her own. The plane jolted again, harder this time. A man 2 rows ahead shouted for help, his voice cracked by panic. Emma could feel the weight of fear pressing on everyone, thick and suffocating. She closed her eyes for a second and whispered, "Please, God, please." Then, silence. Too silent. The flight attendants had stopped moving. The overhead speaker was dead. The air felt heavy and unreal. Someone near the front shouted, "The cockpit. They're not responding." Emma's eyes widened. Through the narrow crack of the open cockpit door, she could just barely see one of the pilots slumped forward. The co-pilot wasn't moving either. For a moment, time froze. Her breath hitched. No, they can't both be unconscious. The attendants rushed forward, pounding on the cockpit door. "Captain, Captain, can you hear me?" No answer. Only the soft, eerie sound of wind scraping the outside of the fuselage. The intercom remained dead. The passengers looked at one another in disbelief. Fear turned into confusion, confusion into helplessness. Someone started crying loudly. Another tried to call family on their phone, though there was no signal. And in the middle of it all sat Emma, 14 years old, trembling, her mind spinning faster than the falling plane. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be at her school's robotics competition, cheering for her friends. But her mom had insisted on this flight, a quick weekend trip to see her father, a retired Air Force pilot who now taught flying lessons. Flying. Emma's head turned toward the cockpit again. She had spent hours in her father's simulator, learning the basics, how to handle a joystick, how to read the altitude, how to stabilize a plane in a storm. He always said, "You never know when you'll need it." Back then, she'd laughed. Now those words echoed in her mind like a prophecy. The attendants were arguing now. One of them tried the cockpit code again, but the door wouldn't open. The emergency override failed, maybe a system glitch, or maybe something worse. Then the plane tilted again, nose down. People screamed. A baby wailed. Emma's instinct screamed louder than her fear. She unbuckled her belt, crawled past 2 seats, and grabbed a fallen intercom handset near the galley. She pressed the button, but nothing. Dead. A flight attendant shouted, "Miss, stay seated." But Emma wasn't listening. Her eyes locked on the cockpit door again. She felt something inside her, not courage exactly, but something stronger, a pull. "I can help," she said, her voice shaky but firm. The attendant looked at her, stunned. "Sweetheart, please sit down." "I can help," Emma repeated. "My dad's a pilot. I know what to do." Her mother gasped behind her, "Emma, no." But the plane jerked again, a terrifying drop that made everyone scream. The oxygen mask swung wildly. Emma crawled toward the cockpit door, hands trembling, heart thundering in her chest. The attendant shouted, "We can't get in, the lock's jammed." Emma grabbed the emergency lever near the door and tried to pull, it wouldn't budge. Her small hand slipped. She tried again, teeth clenched. The metal handle moved slightly, then more, until click. The door popped open just enough for her to squeeze inside. The cockpit was a nightmare. Both pilots were slumped over, one had blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The other was breathing but unconscious. Warning lights flashed red across the panels. Engine failure, hydraulic pressure low, altitude warning. Emma stood frozen for half a second. Then something clicked in her head, her father's voice again, calm and firm. "Greater than, when everything fails, trust your training. Keep the nose level, find your altitude. She slipped into the co-pilot's seat, barely tall enough to see over the dashboard. Her fingers hovered over the controls. The headset was hanging loose, its wire tangled. She picked it up and pressed the transmit button. Hello, can anyone hear me? Nothing but static. She tried again, voice shaking. This is flight. She looked at the label on the console, Flight 208. Both pilots are unconscious. We're losing altitude. A few seconds passed that felt like hours. Then, through the static, a man's voice came through. Greater than, this is air traffic control, we hear you. Who is this? Emma swallowed hard. I'm a passenger. My name's Emma. I'm 14. There was silence on the other end. Then, calm and slow. Greater than, okay, Emma. You're doing great. We're going to help you fly this plane. Her breath shook. Her eyes darted to the altimeter, spinning fast. She grabbed the yoke with both hands, feet pressing against the rudder pedals, trying to steady the plane. Emma, the voice said, we need you to pull up, gently. She did. The nose lifted. The screaming in the cabin softened. Her mother's face appeared through the cockpit door, terrified but full of faith. For the first time, Emma realized everyone on that plane was depending on her. A 14-year-old girl. A trembling kid who'd only ever flown in a game simulator. But now, it was real. The sky was testing her, and she refused to fail. Emma, listen to me carefully, the voice crackled through the headset. This is air traffic control. We're going to help you fly this aircraft. What's your altitude? Emma stared at the blinking dials and flashing red lights. They looked like a language from another world. She spotted the altimeter and squinted. 12,000 feet, dropping fast. Okay, that's fine. Take a deep breath. You're in control now. Her small hands gripped the yoke tighter. The plane trembled beneath her, every movement echoing through her body. She could hear people crying behind the cockpit door, prayers, whispers, someone calling their family's name. She swallowed hard. I don't know if I can do this. The calm voice replied, you already are. Her heart pounded. She glanced at the unconscious pilots. The captain's chest still moved slightly, shallow breaths. One of his hands rested against the throttle lever. Emma gently pushed it forward, just as her dad had once shown her in his old flight simulator. The engine coughed, then sputtered, still dead. ATC, engine's not starting, she said quickly. Copy that. You've lost one engine, but the other may still have power. Look for the ignition switch on your right panel, see it? She scanned frantically, her eyes darting across hundreds of switches and levers. Her palms were slick with sweat. I think I see it. Good. Turn it to start and hold for 3 seconds. She did. 1, 2, 3, and then a miracle. The right engine roared back to life. The whole plane steadied, vibration easing slightly. Cheers erupted from the cabin behind her. Emma could hear someone shouting, she did it. The kid did it, but she couldn't relax, not yet. Good job, Emma, the controller said. Now, I need you to pull the yoke just a little, not too much. Keep your wings level. Her fingers trembled. Like this. That's perfect. For the first time, the plane felt balanced. Clouds drifted below her, silver and heavy with stormlight. The sky stretched endlessly ahead, a soft blue fading to gray. Emma's breathing steadied. She whispered to herself, Dad, I hope you're watching. Suddenly, another alarm went off, a shrill, high-pitched warning. Terrain. Pull up. Terrain. Her heart jumped. ATC, it's yelling at me. Terrain. Stay calm, Emma. That means you're too low. Pull back gently, just a bit. She did. The nose lifted slightly. The alarm silenced. Good, the voice said, steady and calm. You're doing great. Emma blinked away tears. I'm scared. I know, sweetheart, but right now, you're the bravest person in the sky. Behind her, the flight attendants had entered the cockpit quietly. One of them knelt beside the captain, checking his pulse. He's still breathing, but weak, she whispered. Emma nodded, never taking her eyes off the horizon. ATC, what do I do next? You're going to keep her steady, and we'll guide you toward Miami International. You're about 80 miles out. 80 miles. It felt like forever. The clouds outside were thickening again, dark gray and heavy. The storm was back. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. Raindrops began to splatter against the windshield. Lightning flashed, and for a second, the entire cockpit glowed white. Emma gasped but kept her grip. Emma, the voice said, you're entering turbulence. Don't fight it too much. Just keep your wings level and stay calm. She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Copy that. Every gust of wind felt like a test. The yoke shook violently in her hands. Her arms ached, but she refused to let go. At that moment, a memory flashed, her father's laughter as she struggled with the flight simulator years ago. Greater than, you've got steady hands, kiddo, he'd said. Flying's not about strength, it's about calm. Calm. She inhaled deeply, just like he'd taught her. The turbulence eased a little. The plane leveled again. Emma, said the voice, you're doing incredible work. We have your radar signal now. You're about 15 minutes from the airport. Her eyes widened. 15 minutes. Yes. Stay focused. We're clearing all other traffic. You've got the sky to yourself. She could hear faint cheers in the control room through the radio. People were rooting for her, hundreds of miles away. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she smiled. Okay, I'll do my best. Emma, listen carefully, the controller said again. You'll need to begin descending slowly. Pull back the throttle a bit, about 1 inch. She did as told. The plane dipped gently. The clouds parted below, revealing tiny lights, the city, shining like a galaxy beneath her. Her breath caught in her throat. I can see it, I can see the ground. That's perfect, Emma, you're lined up with the runway. Her stomach tightened. I don't know how to land. The voice softened. We'll do it together. Her hands were trembling again. Sweat dripped down her temple. She could feel the weight of 100 lives behind her. Okay, she whispered. Let's do this. Good girl, the controller said. Lower your flaps slowly. See the lever labeled flaps? She nodded, finding it by memory. Got it. Set it to 15 degrees. Nice and smooth. The plane slowed a bit, dipping further. The runway lights glimmered through the mist, 2 glowing lines leading her home. You're doing it, her mother whispered from the doorway, tears in her eyes. You're flying us home, baby. Emma's lips quivered. I'm trying. The ground rushed closer. The controller's voice filled her headset, calm and steady. Greater than, ease the throttle to idle. Gently pull back. Don't fight it, just let her glide. The plane's shadow stretched over the runway. The sound of wind roared louder and louder. Emma's hands tightened. Her heart felt like it would explode. Now, flare a little, lift the nose, yes, yes, that's it. The wheels touched down, once, twice, bouncing slightly before screeching along the tarmac. Sparks flew from the landing gear. The cabin shook violently one last time. And then, silence. The plane slowed to a stop. No one breathed for a full 5 seconds. Then the cabin erupted in cheers, people crying, shouting, clapping. Her mother ran into the cockpit, pulling her into a trembling hug. You did it, Emma. You did it. Tears streamed down her face. We're safe. The air traffic controller's voice came through one last time, choked with emotion. Greater than, welcome home, Captain Emma. She laughed through her tears. The storm outside had finally cleared, sunlight breaking through the clouds. She looked out the window, whispering to herself. Greater than, Dad, I landed. The plane had stopped. Smoke drifted softly from the brakes, heat shimmering across the tarmac. For a few seconds, nobody moved, as if the world itself was frozen in disbelief. Then, one by one, passengers began to clap. A trembling sound at first, then louder, stronger, until the entire cabin was filled with applause, tears, and laughter. She did it, someone shouted. The kid landed the plane. Emma sat frozen in the pilot's seat, hands still gripping the controls, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her mind couldn't process it yet. The roaring engines, the screams, the storm, the endless instructions in her headset, it all blurred into one heartbeat. Then, she felt her mother's arms wrap around her from behind. Her mom was crying, full, shaking sobs of relief. You saved us, baby, you saved us all. Emma blinked, eyes stinging. I just did what they told me. Her mother laughed through tears. No, Emma, you did what no one else could. Outside, the sirens were already wailing. Emergency vehicles raced toward the plane, flashing lights cutting through the gray dawn. The rescue team surrounded the aircraft within minutes, firefighters and medics pouring inside. Is everyone okay? One of them shouted. A flight attendant stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Thanks to her, she said, pointing to Emma. We're alive because of her. When the first responder looked into the cockpit, he froze, expecting to see a trained pilot. Instead, he found a young girl, barely tall enough to see over the dashboard, her hands still trembling, her eyes wide with shock. You flew this thing. he asked in disbelief. Emma nodded weakly. They told me how, over the radio. He smiled softly, shaking his head in awe. Kid, you just made history. Hours later, the passengers were safely off the plane. Paramedics tended to the pilots, both unconscious but stable. The co-pilot opened his eyes briefly as he was carried out and whispered one word when he saw Emma standing nearby. Greater than, thank you. The airport terminal buzzed with chaos, news cameras, flashing lights, and hundreds of voices talking at once. But Emma didn't notice any of it. She sat wrapped in a blanket, sipping warm tea a flight attendant had given her, staring out the window at the plane she had just landed. It felt impossible. She was just a kid. She loved drawing airplanes and building paper gliders with her dad, not actually flying them. And yet, today, she had held 100 lives in her shaking hands, and somehow, she hadn't let them fall. A familiar voice broke through her thoughts. Emma. She turned, and there he was. Her father, still in his old flight jacket, running toward her through the crowd. She stood up as he reached her, and before she could say a word, he pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. You did it, he whispered into her hair. His voice cracked. You really did it. Emma started crying again, gripping his jacket. Dad, I was so scared. Everything was falling, and the pilots weren't moving, and... He pulled back just enough to look at her face. And you stayed calm. You remembered what I taught you. I almost forgot, she admitted. But then I heard your voice in my head. He smiled through tears. Guess I'm louder than fear, huh? Emma laughed weakly. Maybe just a little. The next day, the story exploded across every news channel in the world. Headlines flashed everywhere. Teen girl lands passenger jet after both pilots collapse. 14-year-old hero saves 102 lives mid-flight. TV anchors replayed the tower recordings over and over. You could hear the calm yet trembling voice of a young girl saying, "This is Flight 208, both pilots are down." Reporters called her brave. Some called her a miracle. But Emma just shook her head whenever someone asked how she did it. I didn't feel brave, she told one journalist. I just felt like I had to try. When she visited the hospital to see the pilots, the captain, now recovering, took her hand and smiled. You did what we train our entire lives to do, he said softly. You saved everyone. Weeks later, the Federal Aviation Authority invited Emma and her family to Washington, D.C. There, in front of hundreds of people and flashing cameras, she was given the Medal of Civilian Courage, the youngest person in history to receive it. As she stood on the stage, she glanced toward the audience. In the front row, her father stood proudly, eyes wet with pride. Her mother waved through tears. Emma took a deep breath, stepped up to the microphone, and said, I didn't save that plane alone. The people who believed in me did. The voices that told me to stay calm, to trust myself, that's what saved us. The crowd stood and applauded. That night, back home, Emma sat in her room with the small golden medal beside her. Outside, the world had already started calling her a hero, but inside, she still felt like the same 14-year-old girl who loved clouds and the smell of jet fuel on her dad's jacket. Her father knocked on the door softly and peeked in. Couldn't sleep. She shook her head. I keep hearing the alarms. The voice. The storm. He sat beside her. That's normal. You faced something most adults never could. She looked up. Do you think you'll ever fly again? He smiled. You already did. The hardest flight there is, one you take with your heart. She smiled faintly, resting her head on his shoulder. Maybe next time, I'll do it with both engines. He laughed, and for the first time since that terrifying day, she felt safe. Months passed. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could for someone who had become a symbol of courage. Schools invited her to speak, airlines sent her letters, and pilots from all over the world wrote messages like, you reminded us why we fly. But Emma stayed humble. Every time someone called her, the miracle girl, she'd simply smile and say, greater than, I'm just Emma. The girl who listened. And whenever she heard planes roaring overhead, she'd glance up at the sky with a quiet smile, not of fear, but of peace. Because somewhere, above the clouds, she had found her strength. And she would never lose it again.